The first thing Amina Johnson noticed was the smell, not the usual school smell, pencil shavings, floor wax, cafeteria pizza trying too hard. This was sharper, a cleaner smell, like lemon disinfectant sprayed over panic. It lived in the hallway near the nurse's office, where the lights were always a little too bright, and the air always felt like it belonged to someone else. Amina walked beside her son with a steady pace that didn't match the tightness in her chest. Malcolm Johnson, 10 years old, kept one hand on the strap of his backpack and the other tucked into the pocket of his hoodie. He looked normal at first glance, too normal for the way his breathing sounded if you listened close. A soft whistle when he exhaled, a tiny stutter between breaths like his lungs were negotiating each inhale. "Mom, I'm okay," Malcolm said, already guessing what she was thinking. Amina didn't answer right away. She'd learned that the world loved okay the way it loved fine, as a shortcut out of responsibility. A label you could slap on a child's face while their body quietly disagreed. "You used your inhaler?" she asked, voice low. He nodded. "2 puffs like you said." "And it helped?" Malcolm hesitated. That half-second was enough. Amina's eyes flicked toward the nurse's office door with the little window, where a white poster said, "Health Services" in friendly blue letters. Behind that door, someone would decide whether her child's breathing counted as real. Amina didn't like that. The hallway was busy with the usual morning chaos, white kids laughing too loudly, lockers slamming, teachers calling names. Amina felt eyes on her in the casual way they landed on black parents in school buildings. Not hostile, not always, but always measuring. Like the question wasn't "Who are you?" but "Why are you here?" Malcolm slowed. His shoulders lifted with each breath now, subtle but unmistakable. The muscles at his neck tensed, pulling like ropes under his skin. "Okay," Amina said, keeping her voice soft for him. "We're just going to check in with the nurse. That's all." Malcolm nodded, but his eyes were glossy. Not tears, not yet. Fear. The kind that came from knowing how close your body could get to the edge and how far adults could be from noticing. Amina opened the door. The nurse's office was warm. Too warm. A space heater hummed in the corner even though the building was already overheated. On the counter, a basket of cough drops sat like decoration. The walls were covered with cheerful posters about hydration and hand washing. Behind the desk sat Nurse Karen Whitlock, white, late 40s, hair pulled back into a tidy bun that suggested discipline and certainty. She wore pale blue scrubs and a badge with a red medical symbol. Her computer monitor glowed with student records, attendance, notes, data that could feel like a weapon when it was wrong. Karen looked up. Her eyes moved from Amina to Malcolm and paused on Malcolm's face like she was scanning for something. Proof, maybe, or a story that matched her expectations. "Can I help you?" she asked, tone polite but already edged with impatience. Amina stepped forward. "My son has asthma. He's having trouble breathing." Karen's eyes dropped to Malcolm's chest, then to his hands. Malcolm stood still, trying to stand still because children learned early what kinds of discomfort were allowed to be visible. "He looks fine," Karen said. The words landed like a slap because they were so casual. Amina kept her expression neutral. "He's not fine. He used his rescue inhaler and he's still wheezing." Karen clicked her tongue softly, as if this was an interruption, not an emergency. "Has he been running around? Sometimes kids get winded." Amina stared at her. Malcolm's breathing hitched. He swallowed hard, his throat working like it was trying to push air through a narrow straw. "He wasn't running," Amina said. "He's having an asthma flare." Karen leaned back in her chair. "We see a lot of anxiety here," she said. "Kids get stressed before tests. Sometimes they interpret it as trouble breathing." Amina felt the anger rise, hot, immediate, but she held it down with practiced control. She'd learned that anger, on her face, could become a reason to dismiss her, a reason to call security, a reason to change the story. So she stayed calm. Calm was armor. "Malcolm," Amina said gently, "tell her what you feel." Malcolm inhaled shallowly. "It's tight," he whispered. Like I can't get all the air." Karen nodded once, the way adults nod when they want a child to stop talking. "Okay," she said, still seated. "Well, let's have you sit down for a minute. Take some water." Amina's eyes sharpened. "I want you to check his peak flow." Karen blinked, surprised by the specificity. "His what?" "Peak flow meter," Amina repeated. "It measures how well he's breathing out. You should have one." Karen's mouth tightened. "We don't always need that. We can observe." Amina pointed subtly at Malcolm's neck. The slight pull with every breath was clearer now, like his body was working overtime. "This isn't observation time," Amina said. Her voice remained polite, but there was steel under it. "This is measurement time." Karen's eyes flicked again, this time toward Amina's face, as if trying to decide what kind of mother she was. The kind that could be ignored, the kind that would leave, or the kind that would make it expensive to be wrong. "We'll give him a moment," Karen insisted. "Kids sometimes exaggerate symptoms." Amina's hands clenched at her sides. Exaggerate. The word carried history. It wasn't just about Malcolm, it was about every time black pain had been treated like a performance, every time a black voice had been interpreted as drama instead of data. Malcolm sat on the vinyl cot, feet dangling. He tried to take a deeper breath and failed. His eyes widened a fraction. Amina stepped closer to him. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Listen to me," she whispered. "Focus on slow breaths. I'm here." Karen stood at last, but not with urgency. With reluctance, as if she was humouring them. "All right," she said. "Let me see his inhaler." Amina handed it over. Karen inspected it with the same skepticism someone might use on a fake ID. "This is empty," Karen said. Amina blinked. "It's not. It's new." Karen shook it. "Feels light." "It's a metered dose inhaler," Amina said, careful and controlled. "It doesn't feel like anything. It has doses. There's a counter." Karen paused, then looked at the tiny window. The counter read 162. A tiny moment of correction, a tiny crack. Karen cleared her throat. "Okay, well, we can administer 2 puffs here and see." "We already did that," Amina said. "At home, and it didn't resolve it." Karen's face tightened again. "Ma'am, I've been a school nurse for 16 years. Amina met her gaze. "And I've been Malcolm's mother for 10. A beat of silence. Somewhere in the hallway, a bell rang. The world kept moving, indifferent to a child fighting for air. Karen turned toward a cabinet and opened it, rummaging through supplies with just enough noise to make it seem like she was doing something. She pulled out a paper cup, filled it with water, and handed it to Malcolm. "Drink," she said. Malcolm took a sip, then coughed lightly. The cough triggered a tighter wheeze. His shoulders rose. His lips parted, searching. Amina's heart kicked hard. "Peak flow," she said again, no longer asking. "Now." Karen exhaled through her nose like she was dealing with a difficult customer. "We have one," she said, almost grudgingly, "but it's usually for documented." "His asthma is documented," Amina interrupted. "It's in his file. I submitted the action plan and the doctor's letter at the beginning of the year." Karen paused, then turned back to the computer, typing quickly. Her fingers moved with sudden urgency, not to help Malcolm, but to find a reason not to. "I'm not seeing that," Karen said after a moment. Amina's stomach dropped. Of course, the paperwork that existed until it was inconvenient, the forms that vanished in systems that never lost anything important to the school. Amina reached into her bag and pulled out a folded document, creased from being carried, worn from being necessary. She handed it over. Karen stared at it. "Where did you get this?" Amina held her gaze. "From Malcolm's pulmonologist, and from me. Because I learned not to trust school systems to keep my child's life in their folders." Karen's cheeks flushed faintly. She skimmed the page, eyes scanning the bold words. "Asthma action." Plan severe persistent asthma peak flow personal best, 320 red zone, below 160, emergency. Karen's lips pressed together. Okay, she said, tone shifting slightly, still defensive but with a new tension underneath. Let's do the peak flow. She went back to the cabinet and pulled out a plastic device, blue and white, simple, precise. The peak flow meter looked almost toy-like, which made it more frightening. Something so small deciding something so big. Karen handed it to Malcolm. Put your lips around it and blow hard, she instructed, like you're blowing out birthday candles. Malcolm tried. He inhaled shallowly, then blew. The effort made his face strain. The meter's little indicator moved, barely. Karen frowned and reset it. You need to blow harder. Malcolm tried again. A longer blow this time, but it ended in a cough. His eyes watered, not from emotion, but from lack. The indicator settled on a number. Karen stared. Amina leaned forward. The reading was 154, below 160. Red zone. For a moment, Karen didn't speak. Amina felt the room shift, like the air itself had changed. The denial had nowhere to stand now, not when a number sat there, clean and undeniable. Malcolm swallowed and whispered, "Mum?" Amina squeezed his shoulder. "I'm here," she said. Her voice stayed steady for him, even as her insides roared. Karen cleared her throat, the sound too dry. Let's do one more," she said quickly, as if repetition could undo reality. Malcolm tried again. His breath sounded thinner now, like the wheeze was winning. The indicator dropped. 146. Amina's spine went cold. Karen's face went pale in a slow wave. She set the meter down like it had suddenly become dangerous. Her eyes darted to Malcolm, then to the action plan, then to the phone on her desk. "This is lower than expected," Karen said, voice smaller. Amina looked directly at her. "This is what I told you." Karen's hand hovered over the phone, hesitating. That hesitation made Amina furious. "Call 911, Amina said. "Now." Karen's eyes snapped up. "We don't." "Call," Amina repeated, sharper now. "Or I will. And I will say a school nurse refused emergency protocol while a child was in the red zone." Karen flinched. The threat wasn't volume. It was documentation. Consequence. The kind that couldn't be dismissed as miscommunication. Karen picked up the phone. Her voice changed when she spoke. Suddenly efficient, suddenly urgent, suddenly professional. As if professionalism had been sitting in her pocket the whole time, waiting for proof. "Hello, yes, this is Hawthorne Elementary," she said. "We have a student experiencing respiratory distress. Asthma, peak flow reading is dropping." Amina listened, jaw clenched. So the emergency existed now, not when she said it, when the number did. Amina pulled out her own phone and texted Malcolm's father with one hand, never taking her eyes off her son. "Red zone. Ambulance coming. Meet us at the school." Malcolm's breathing was shallow and fast now. His eyes stayed on Amina like she was the only stable thing in the room. "Hey," Amina said, crouching so she was level with him. "Look at me. You're doing great. You're not alone." Malcolm tried to nod. It was small. Karen hung up and moved quickly now, pulling out a nebulizer kit. Her hands shook slightly as she set it up. "I'm going to administer albuterol," she said. Amina watched her carefully. "Good." Karen avoided her gaze. The mask went over Malcolm's face. The machine started its soft, mechanical hiss. Mist filled the plastic chamber. Malcolm inhaled, coughed, inhaled again. Amina stayed close, one hand on his knee, grounding him. Outside the office door, footsteps gathered, teachers whispering, curiosity creeping. Someone cracked the door open to look. Amina turned her head slightly and met the gaze of a white teacher in the doorway. The teacher's eyes widened, then she pulled the door closed. Amina didn't care about their curiosity. She cared about Malcolm's lungs. The siren arrived in the distance, growing louder, closer. Amina felt relief and anger in the same breath. Relief that help was coming. Anger that help had required a number to be believed. Karen stood beside the desk, face tight with worry. "I didn't realize it was that severe," she said quietly. Amina looked at her. "I did," Amina replied. "That's why I came." The siren cut off abruptly outside. Amina heard the heavy steps of paramedics in the hallway, the clip of equipment, the voice of authority that always arrived with urgency that black mothers had to beg for. The door opened and 2 paramedics stepped in, white, focused, moving fast. "What do we have?" one asked. Karen spoke quickly, almost too quickly, as if speed could erase the earlier dismissal. 10-year-old male, asthma exacerbation, peak flow in the red zone, dropping, albuterol started. Amina watched their faces change as they assessed Malcolm. One of them knelt immediately, checking oxygen saturation. "Okay, buddy," the paramedic said gently to Malcolm. "We're going to help you breathe easier." Amina rose, heart pounding, and stepped back just enough to let them work, but not far. Never far. As the paramedics prepared to lift Malcolm onto the stretcher, Amina's eyes flicked to the peak flow meter still sitting on the counter, its small indicator resting at a number that had turned disbelief into action. A plastic witness. Amina swallowed hard. This was only the beginning, because when Malcolm was safe, when his breathing settled, there would still be a question hanging in the air, heavy and unavoidable. How low did his breath have to drop before they finally listened? The ambulance doors closed with a final, metallic certainty. Amina stood on the curb outside Hawthorne Elementary, the sound echoing in her bones long after the paramedics climbed into the front. She could still see Malcolm through the small rear window, strapped in, oxygen mask fogging faintly with each breath, eyes locked on her until the vehicle pulled away. She raised a hand. He lifted 2 fingers weakly in response. Their signal. Then the siren cut through the air and the ambulance disappeared into traffic. For a moment, Amina didn't move. The school building loomed behind her. Brick, banners, cheerful slogans about community and care stretched across the entrance. The same building where, less than 20 minutes ago, her son's breathing had been treated like a misunderstanding, like nerves, like inconvenience. A white administrator approached her, heels clicking too sharply on the pavement. "Ms. Johnson," the woman asked, clipboard already in hand. "I'm Vice Principal Ellen Reeves." Amina nodded once. "We'll need you to come inside and complete an incident report," Reeves continued. Her voice was calm, practiced, soothing in the way people learned when they spoke to parents they believed might become difficult. Amina looked at her. "My child is on the way to the hospital," she said. "I'm going there." "Yes, of course," Reeves replied quickly. "But protocol requires—" "Protocol didn't require action until a number dropped," Amina said evenly. "So protocol can wait." Reeves blinked, clearly unprepared for resistance delivered without raised volume. "Well," she said after a moment, "we'll follow up later." Amina turned and walked to her car. Her hands shook as she unlocked it. Not from fear, from the release of adrenaline her body had been hoarding. She sat in the driver's seat for a second longer than necessary, gripping the steering wheel until her breathing slowed enough to trust herself on the road. As she pulled away, her phone buzzed. "Darius. On my way. Which hospital?" Amina dictated the reply at the next red light, her voice steady but tight. "County General. He's breathing, but it was bad. I'll meet you there." The drive felt too long and too short at the same time. Every light that turned red felt like a betrayal. Every green felt insufficient. Her mind replayed the nurse's words on a loop. "He looks fine. Kids exaggerate. We can observe." Observe. Amina had observed Malcolm's asthma since he was 3 years old. She'd observed the first wheeze that sent them to the ER. The first night she slept sitting upright beside his bed, counting breaths. The first time a doctor said, "This is serious," and meant it. She'd learned to read his body the way other parents read report cards. The angle of his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth, the way fear crept in before air disappeared. She had learned because she had to. At the hospital, everything moved faster. A nurse met her at the entrance and directed her straight back. No waiting room, no paperwork first. The irony tasted bitter. Here, Malcolm didn't need to prove he was struggling. The oxygen monitor told the story before anyone asked. Amina followed the gurney down bright halls, the smell of antiseptic sharper than at school, but honest. Machines beeped, shoes squeaked, voices called out numbers that mattered. "Mum," Malcolm said through the mask, voice thin but present. "I'm here," Amina replied instantly, taking his hand. "You're doing great." They moved him into a room and transferred him to the bed with quick efficiency. A respiratory therapist adjusted the nebulizer, checking settings. A doctor, a white woman in her 30s with tired eyes and confidence that came from repetition, asked questions while working. How long has he been symptomatic? When was his last inhaler use? Any triggers this morning? Amina answered without hesitation. Facts lined up cleanly when people listened. He was in the red zone at school, Amina added. Peak flow dropped to 146. The doctor's head snapped up. They measured peak flow. Yes, Amina said, after dismissing it. The doctor nodded once, sharp. That's low for his age and height. No debate, no minimizing. They worked quickly. Medication, monitoring, oxygen adjusted. Malcolm's breathing eased slowly, like a tight knot loosening one loop at a time. Amina sat in the chair beside the bed, exhaustion settling in layers now that the immediate danger had passed. Her phone buzzed again. Emails, texts, notifications she ignored. Darius arrived 20 minutes later, breathless and pale, eyes going straight to Malcolm. "He's okay?" he asked, voice tight. "He's getting there," Amina said. Darius squeezed Malcolm's hand, then looked at Amina. What happened? Amina told him everything, not emotionally, chronologically, because details mattered. When she finished, Darius exhaled sharply. "They didn't believe you." "They believed the meter," Amina replied. "Eventually." A nurse returned with discharge paperwork hours later. Malcolm would stay overnight for observation, but he was stable now, colour back in his face, breathing slower, deeper. As Malcolm slept, Amina sat awake, the events replaying again, but this time something else joined them. Anger, yes, but also clarity. She pulled out the folded asthma action plan from her bag and smoothed it on the small hospital table. The paper was worn, edges soft from use. She'd carried it to every school meeting, every intake, every conversation where she'd had to explain her child's lungs to people who assumed they already knew better. She opened her laptop and began to write, not an email, a record. She wrote about arriving at the nurse's office, about being told Malcolm looked fine, about anxiety being suggested before asthma, about the refusal to measure until she insisted, about the peak flow readings, exact numbers included. She wrote without adjectives that could be dismissed, without speculation, without anger, just sequence, cause and effect. She wrote names: Karen Whitlock, school nurse; Ellen Reeves, vice principal. She wrote the time, she saved the document. In the morning, the school called. Vice Principal Reeves again. Apologetic now, concerned, talking about reviewing procedures and supporting students with medical needs. Amina listened without interrupting. When Reeves finished, Amina spoke. "My son could not breathe," she said calmly, and the adult responsible for his care chose observation over measurement. There was a pause. "We take that very seriously," Reeves said. "I hope so," Amina replied, "because I am documenting this formally." Another pause, heavier this time. "Of course," Reeves said. "We'll cooperate fully." After the call ended, Amina looked at Malcolm, still asleep, chest rising steadily now. She brushed a curl away from his forehead. He would go back to that school. The world would still expect him to prove his pain. But next time, Amina would not ask. She would arrive with numbers, records, language the system respected, and if that still wasn't enough, she closed her laptop gently. Then she would make it impossible to ignore, because her child's breath was not a debate. By the time Malcolm was discharged, Amina had slept in pieces. Not real sleep, just the kind your body steals when it finally believes your child will keep breathing without you watching every rise of his chest. She dozed in the stiff hospital chair, woke to monitor beeps, dozed again. Each time she opened her eyes, her first thought was the same. Is he breathing? On the morning they left, Malcolm walked slowly but steadily out of the pediatric wing, backpack slung over one shoulder like he was trying to prove to the world, and maybe to himself, that he was still a normal kid who belonged in normal places. Amina kept pace beside him. Darius carried the plastic bag of discharge papers, prescriptions, and the new spacer device the hospital insisted they use. Outside, the air was cold and clean. Malcolm inhaled it carefully, as if he didn't trust the sky yet. In the car, he sat in silence for a while, looking out the window. Then he spoke in a quiet voice that landed hard. "Mum, did I do something wrong?" Amina's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No, baby," she said immediately. "You did everything right." "But Nurse Whitlock said I was probably just nervous," Malcolm continued, still looking away. Like I was making it up." Darius turned in his seat. "You weren't making anything up," he said firmly. Malcolm nodded slightly, but his eyebrows stayed knit. Why didn't she believe me? Amina felt the question settle into her chest like a stone, because the answer was too big for a 10-year-old. Because the truth didn't fit neatly into a school lesson, so she chose what she could give him without breaking him. "Sometimes," Amina said carefully, "adults think they know what's happening before they check, and that's not fair. It's their mistake, not yours." Malcolm was quiet again. Then he asked, "Am I going to have to go back there?" Amina glanced at him in the rearview mirror. His face was calm, but his eyes had the same glossy edge she'd seen before the ambulance. "Yes," she said gently, "but we're going back differently." 2 days later, Hawthorne Elementary sent an email that tried to sound caring and neutral at the same time. "We would like to schedule a support meeting to review Malcolm Johnson's health plan and ensure appropriate accommodations moving forward." Support meeting. Amina had learned what those words usually meant: a room full of people protecting the institution. A conversation shaped to keep liability low and parents quiet. She forwarded the email to Darius and replied with her own conditions. Meeting in person. Nurse Whitlock present. Vice Principal Reeves present. Classroom teacher present. District Health Coordinator invited. Written minutes taken. Copies of Malcolm's asthma action plan entered into the file immediately. She didn't ask if those things were possible. She wrote them as if they already were. The confirmation arrived within the hour. On the day of the meeting, Amina dressed with intention. Not formal, she wasn't performing respectability for anyone, but sharp and composed. A dark sweater, clean jeans, earrings that made her feel anchored. She printed 3 copies of the asthma action plan, the hospital discharge summary, and a 1-page timeline she had typed herself. She also brought the peak flow meter Malcolm used at home. Small, plastic, honest. Darius met her in the parking lot. He wore his work uniform from the City Transit Department, reflective stripes catching the grey light. "You ready?" he asked. Amina nodded. "I've been ready since she said, 'He looks fine.'" They walked in together. At the front desk, a white receptionist looked up and smiled too brightly. "Can I help you?" "We're here for Malcolm Johnson's health meeting," Amina said. The receptionist's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, just long enough to betray nerves, then she pointed them down the hallway. Conference Room B. The door was already open. Inside, the room smelled like dry erase markers and stale coffee. A long table sat in the centre with chairs arranged neatly, like order could be created through symmetry. Vice Principal Ellen Reeves stood as they entered, her smile practised and careful. "Ms. Johnson, Mr. Johnson," she said. "Thank you for coming," Amina corrected her gently. "Brooks, my last name is Brooks. Malcolm's last name is Johnson." Reeves blinked. "Oh, my apologies." Amina nodded once. She had no doubt the school knew Malcolm's name. Mistakes like that didn't come from confusion, they came from not having to care. At the table sat 3 more people. Karen Whitlock, the school nurse, hands folded, lips pressed into a thin line. Ms. Laura Peterson, Malcolm's white classroom teacher, looking uncomfortable and concerned in equal measure. Dr. Stephen Adler, a white district health coordinator, older, with wireframe glasses and the kind of calm that came from not being the one in danger. Amina felt the weight of the room settle. The institution had arrived in human form. They sat. Reeves began. "We're here to review what happened and ensure we have the right supports in place. Our priority is Malcolm's safety." Amina looked directly at her. "Good," she said. "Then we'll start with what happened." Reeves's smile twitched. "Of course." Dr. Adler leaned forward slightly. "Before we begin, I want to say we take asthma very seriously. Schools can be challenging environments for respiratory conditions." Amina held up a hand, polite but firm. "Dr. Adler, I'm sure you do, but what I need today is not general asthma information. I need accountability and procedure." The room went quiet. Karen Whitlock shifted in her chair. Reeves cleared her throat. "Maybe we can let Nurse Whitlock explain the situation." Amina turned to Karen. "Please." Karen's eyes flicked to Reeves, then back to Amina. Her voice came out clipped. "Malcolm came in stating he was having trouble breathing," Karen said. "I assessed him visually and did not observe signs of acute distress initially." Amina nodded slowly. "And I told you he had used his rescue inhaler and was still wheezing." Karen's jaw tightened. "You did. And you suggested it might be anxiety," Amina continued, tone calm. Karen hesitated. "I said sometimes students experience stress that can feel like shortness of breath." "And you said kids exaggerate symptoms," Amina added. Ms. Peterson's eyes widened slightly. Reeves looked down at her notes. Karen's cheeks flushed. "I may have said some students do." Amina opened her folder and slid a paper onto the table. Her timeline, with exact quotes and times. "I wrote down what you said immediately after," Amina said, "because I've learned that if I don't write it down, it becomes miscommunication." Dr. Adler glanced at the page. His face changed, not dramatically, but enough. Reeves straightened. "Ms. Brooks, we're not trying to minimize." "I know," Amina replied evenly. "You're trying to manage." Reeves went still. Amina placed the home peak flow meter on the table. "Let's talk about measurement," she said, eyes on Karen. "How long after we arrived did you perform a peak flow reading?" Karen's fingers tightened together. "I don't have the exact minutes." "I do," Amina said, sliding another page forward. 12 minutes. Silence. 12 minutes, Amina repeated, letting it sink in. In those 12 minutes, Malcolm's peak flow dropped below 160. In those 12 minutes, you offered water and observation. In those 12 minutes, my child's air got thinner. Ms. Peterson swallowed hard. She looked genuinely upset now. Karen's voice rose slightly. "I administered albuterol as soon as the reading indicated." "As soon as the reading forced you to believe me," Amina corrected. Karen opened her mouth, closed it. Dr. Adler finally spoke, voice cautious. "Peak flow can fluctuate." Amina turned toward him. "It can, which is why the action plan exists." She pulled out the asthma action plan and placed it in front of him. "Personal best 320, red zone below 160, emergency protocol." Dr. Adler read it quickly, nodding. Reeves jumped in. "We're updating Malcolm's file immediately. That's already in process." Amina kept her eyes on Reeves. "It should have already been in his file. I submitted it at the start of the year." Reeves's tone softened. "Sometimes documents don't transfer correctly between systems." Amina smiled once, small and joyless. "Funny how it always seems to be the life-saving documents that don't transfer." The room held its breath. Darius leaned forward for the first time. His voice was low but firm. "We're not here to argue," Darius said. "We're here so our son doesn't end up in an ambulance again because someone decided he looked fine." Karen flinched. Amina nodded. "Exactly." She opened the hospital discharge papers and slid them down the table. "County General documented his exacerbation as severe," Amina said. "He required continuous nebulizer treatments and monitoring overnight. This wasn't a panic attack. This wasn't anxiety. This was asthma." Ms. Peterson's eyes glistened. "I had no idea it got that bad," she whispered. Amina turned to her. "Ms. Peterson, this isn't on you, but you need to know what to watch for. Malcolm will not always have me in the hallway." Ms. Peterson nodded quickly. "Tell me what you need." Amina took a breath. Here was the pivot, away from confrontation toward protection. "Here's what we need," Amina said, counting on her fingers, voice steady. "Malcolm's asthma action plan must be scanned into his file today, not later. Today. Malcolm must be allowed to carry his inhaler and use it without being questioned or punished. The nurse's office must keep a spacer and nebulizer kit available, and staff must be trained to use them. Peak flow readings must be taken immediately when Malcolm reports breathing difficulty. No, wait and see. A written policy. If Malcolm is in the red zone or dropping, the school calls 911 and parents immediately. Ms. Peterson and any substitute teachers must receive a one-page symptom checklist and the emergency plan." Reeves nodded repeatedly. "Yes, absolutely." Dr. Adler wrote notes, his pen moving faster now. Karen sat stiff, eyes down. Amina paused. "And one more thing." They looked up. "If I tell you my child cannot breathe," Amina said, eyes on Karen, "you will treat that as real before you treat it as convenient." Karen's throat moved. Amina didn't let her off the hook. "Say it." Karen's face flushed deeper. Her voice came out quieter than before. "I will treat it as real," Karen said. Amina held her gaze. "Before the meter." Karen swallowed. "Before the meter." The room went silent again, but this silence was different. It wasn't defensive, it was structural. A beam shifting. Reeves cleared her throat. "We also want to discuss how Malcolm is feeling emotionally after this event." Amina's chest tightened. "He asked me if he did something wrong." Ms. Peterson's hand flew to her mouth. Karen's eyes flickered. Guilt or discomfort, Amina couldn't tell. "He asked that," Amina repeated, "because an adult in this building suggested he was exaggerating. He's 10. He trusted you." Karen looked down. Darius's voice hardened slightly. "You can't fix that with a poster about hydration." Reeves looked pained. "We can offer counselling support." Amina nodded. "That's fine. But I also want Malcolm to hear, from the adults who failed him, that it wasn't his fault." Reeves blinked. Yes," Amina said. Calm. Final. "He needs to hear it." Dr. Adler spoke carefully. "A restorative conversation could be appropriate." Amina nodded. "Then schedule it." Reeves scribbled a note. Amina closed her folder slowly. "And minutes," she added. "I want a written summary of this meeting emailed to us by end of day, including the new procedures and the commitments stated aloud." Reeves nodded quickly. "Yes." Amina looked around the table one last time. This was how it worked. Not because it was right, but because it was real. A child's breath had required numbers, papers, signatures, and a room full of professionals to finally be taken seriously. Amina stood. "Thank you," she said, not warmly, not coldly, just precisely. "We'll be watching how this is implemented." Darius stood with her. As they walked out, Ms. Peterson followed them to the door. "Miss Brooks," she said softly, "I'm sorry." Amina paused, looked at her. "I believe you," Amina said. "So show Malcolm you believe him too." Ms. Peterson nodded, tears in her eyes. In the hallway, Amina felt the building differently now. Not friendly, not safe, but aware. They had left evidence behind in that room. Signatures, minutes, promises spoken out loud. The institution would try to return to normal. Amina wouldn't let it, because Malcolm's breathing was not a lesson the school got to forget.